Welcome to Tech and Test, where we unravel the intricacies of technology, delve into the world of software engineering, and challenge the boundaries of software testing. Your host, Peter Johnson, will help you navigate the digital landscape, exploring the latest in tech, sharing insights into software development, and talking to the people that drive our digital world. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
And welcome to another episode of Tech and Test with me, Peter Johnson. And today we have Raman Judge, who's a QA director. Raman, welcome to Tech and Test.
Hi. Thank you for having me here, Peter.
Thank you for being here. It's amazing.
Yeah, great.
Awesome. So I guess, you got into QA at some point. And how did that journey start for you?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. My bachelor's degree, before I went on to do my master's, my bachelor's degree was in computing and business information systems many, many, many years ago. And it had various different modules to it. It was back in the days of, without giving my age away, but back in the days of where we followed a very waterfall model, and everyone, it felt, was pigeonholed. You pick a career, you go into analysis, you go into development, you go into QA, you go into a support role, etc., etc. So the degree course itself covered all the different facets. So it was touching on a bit of development, a bit of database, a bit of QA, etc. Then in the third year of the degree, because I did what we called then a sandwich course or a placement, industrial placement, and that is how my journey into QA began. Right. So what I mean by that is my university had a connection or affiliation with BT, British Telecom, big institution here in the UK, and every year they come to the university, they look for students, etc. And they had an open day assessment day. So I made the first round for that, shall we say. So 40 students went, and they were only going to pick 12, and they were going to place these students into the various different roles I said. So support, development, QA. So I didn't go in thinking or saying I was going to be in QA. Didn't even know I was going to get selected, right? At that point, didn't really know I was touching on all the different aspects of my degree course. And went into this open day, had a whole assessment, similar to things grad people are aware of on grad schemes today, right?
Okay, yeah.
Assessment day, they gave us an exercise, we paired up, we did a group exercise. Always they're looking for the ones that show the leadership skills or the ones that are inclusive of the others in the room. Obviously now, with many years of experience behind me, I know the kind of things we look for as a hiring manager myself. Back then I was a bit oblivious to it. I was myself in the room. Then I had a one-on-one interview. On the back of that, I was lucky to be one of the 12 selected, and they being whoever the hiring managers were at the time, put me in QA. And that is not it in a nutshell, but that's where the journey began, shall we say. So that was great. That was fine. I was just happy to have an industrial placement, and I thought, this is going to open up all sorts of doors for me. I'm going to go back, finish my degree, and I'm going to have a job for life, etc. That was the thought process. Happy to have found a placement. So then I obviously started the placement, did the year with them, and, actually sort of learned hands-on what it meant to be in a QA role. It was a UI we were testing. It was hands-on, very manual, less automation at that particular time. And I loved it.
Awesome.
If you have to put it quite simply. I loved it. I loved finding bugs. I loved finding this doesn't work the way it's meant to work. I loved, looking into requirements, analysing them, and I had a real buzz about what I was doing. Obviously, I know as the years evolved, as I found less defects in applications, I was happy to shift my mindset. But back then it was like, wow, I found this defect, working with the team, working with the developers. That was it. Put very simply, I was kind of placed into it because that's what the team thought. You've got the skill sets that are going to take you well into a QA role.
I see. So you think you were placed based on skills at that time?
Yeah, I would say that. They've looked at me, observed me, they've spoken to me. Maybe in the one-on-one interview, it was something that I've obviously answered, and they've best placed me there. And, clearly, we're talking over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
There's obviously something there that's resonated.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to say all along the path or the journey has been plain sailing.
No.
It hasn't. And there have been times where I've questioned, is this really what I want to do?
Interesting.
Maybe there've been projects that were out of my comfort zone, and I'm like, I'm not sure that this is the path I want to stick to, but I did.
Yeah, and there you go, right? You're really an example of how that's worked out quite very nicely, right? I can see not just the technical skills that you've demonstrated, like maybe back then, but I mean, actually, this brings me on to like, what does it take to get into like growth? What's been important for growth actually in your career? Because you've started off in QA there, and you sort of grew into different roles and different IC roles.
Yeah,
it can't just be the technical skills, can it?
I think that obviously helps and goes part and parcel, but you've got to have a combination, haven't you? So taking it back, so I had various individual contributor roles along the way. It was never a thought process that I want to go into QA leadership. Didn't even know what that looked like, right? And I've worked in various organizations, various industries as well.
I see.
I'm in payments now, and I have been for many number of years. But prior to that, there've been lots of other industries along the path, and it's kind of been a natural progression, shall we say? So initially, it was just very happy being an individual contributor, being part of a team. And then I did get to a point where I thought, I think I'm capable of more. And I enjoy the people side of things. I enjoy the... someone actually asked me, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but someone actually asked me, it came up in one of these icebreaker sort of exercise things that I did. Yeah. If I was not in QA, what would I be doing? And I think I would be in a people culture, HR, that kind of role. I like working with people. I like seeing the best in people.
Yes.
I like, mentoring people, coaching people, giving that feedback, that kind of loop. So there came a time where I thought, I think I want to move on from being an individual contributor.
I see.
And my step into then, shall we say, leadership came a bit more organically, where I was in the same organization at the time, and an opportunity arose to be a test team lead. So which meant you were not only leading on the project and whatever we were doing in a sprint team. By this time, I'd moved into a very agile organization, but it was also having the opportunity to have line management responsibilities for a couple of QA as well. So it wasn't like big bang, here's a whole team of people. Right. It was a little bit more of a, here's 2-3 QA, so lead them, lead the technical side of things alongside that.
I see. I got it. So how did you cope with moving, like, I guess, right, as you start leading people more, you're doing less technical work because you're more involved in strategy and high level kind of planning and test plans and all that kind of stuff. How did you sort of cope with that in terms of, if you enjoy doing like individual contributor stuff, like getting your hands really dirty, were you really happy to give some of that up in terms of taking more sort of leadership in that respect? So
it wasn't easy, right? Because all these years you've been used to being an individual contributor, and almost in a way you could quantify at the end of the day, I've tested X amount of something, right? Today, this was my goal. I was going to talk to developer, I was going to test this, I was going to start writing some test cases for some other part of the project. And then all of a sudden you're going from that and you're trying to balance the technical expertise with some strategic thinking, right? Because you're a little bit hands-on, then you're a little bit thinking of the bigger picture, leading on the project, but then you're also having maybe a people concern issue and dealing with that. So there were days where I did think, what have I let myself in for? Am I right for this? Am I, because I'm struggling to let go of the hands-on testing versus the leading people. But I tried to sort of say there was a reason why I wanted this, why I felt I was ready to step into this. So, be a bit more easy on yourself, and it will come with time. And you can't do it all. So there does come a point you have to start delegating, right? And that's the whole point when you start leading people. And because my foray into leadership was where I was line managing the QA within the team, the Scrum team I was in, I felt it was easier for me to delegate to them because we were in the same team. So it was a case of, I have these other responsibilities. So now let's work together on the QA side of this. I can mentor you, I can coach you so you can pick up some more of this project work.
I see. Yeah. So you saw the opportunity for like basically upskilling and growing other people, and that also was like exciting for you, not just the technology in the team, but
exactly.
It's like, wow, these people can actually be like, empowered in some way.
And that's one of the things of being a leader, right? It's you can't do it all, and you want to bring other people up along the way with you. So you do have to start delegating and trusting them to be able to pick up the extra responsibilities as well.
So actually, like now you've mentioned that, what do you think are good qualities of a leader? Like if you were to, sketch out on a piece of paper the perfect leader.
Not saying that's me, right?
Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Just in general, from your experience, I guess, what themes do you think a good leader has, right?
So good question, right? So we've all had them.
Right,
haven't we? Leaders, good ones, bad ones, great ones, indifferent ones.
Yeah.
So over the years, I don't know. No one's born being a leader, right? You look at other leaders and you think the way that particular leader, and I've had some really good ones, right? I have. And you look at the way that leader helped you deal with the situation, whether that was a personal thing, a work thing, a career path, a goal. And you look at that in your mind and you think the way he or she made me feel in that particular point is something really resonates with me. And that, now as a leader myself, I think back to those examples.
Wow. Yeah.
So and that's the way I try to lead, the ones that made me feel good about situations and the ones that maybe didn't make me feel so good, how I would do that differently.
Interesting.
So to answer your question, there's loads of qualities that make a good leader. And this is actually an interview question I have recently. I've been hiring some QA managers, right? So it is a question I've had and not that I've given it a lot of thought, but I do have a couple of things that I think that make a good leader, right?
Yeah.
And one of them, I think high up there, is empathy. Yeah. So thinking of the emotions and perspectives of your team members, and that helps you connect on a personal level, putting yourself in their shoes. So coming back to the point I said, where I've had the good leaders or the great leaders in the past, right?
Yeah.
How they're able to empathize with me and come to me and understand me at my level, right? So I think that's high up there and really, really important, right? And I think empathy kind of goes hand in hand with vulnerability too.
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So by that, I mean showing your vulnerability.
Yes.
So if you can show and expose yourself to others. And that doesn't mean giving everything away about yourself, right? But if people see you like that, then they're willing to be more open with you, right?
Yeah.
So I've had some leadership training recently and, we had a whole, and that's a whole, probably a podcast in itself for another time.
Sure.
But we had a whole, there was a very common theme of vulnerability, and how you need to, show yourself to be vulnerable amongst your team members, right? Because I think people can resonate with you that much more.
Absolutely. It's almost like being your full self at work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because, I've seen in different environments, maybe some people being a bit more like protective, right? And there's some maybe vulnerability that's hidden there and they don't want to be exposed to that vulnerability. Sure. And that creates people in my like mind to sort of close down a bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when people start doing that, then they're not going to give their best work.
That's it. So I think empathy, vulnerability is a quality, definitely. Another key one is communication skills, right? So, I'm not saying I'm there with that. I've definitely got a lot of improvements there to make.
Okay.
But it's something, that's evolved over the years. So listening to your team members, encouraging open dialogue, So, making it clear what the expectation is, what the priorities are, right? So I've had leaders in the past where it's like, I need you to do this, 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 and this. And it's like, that's fine. But, there's only so many hours in the day, right? So if you want me, and then they put another something on top of you. And I'm glad and I'm open to the opportunities and to explore them. But it's a case of then, okay, if you want me to do all this and there's a deadline, something has to give,
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
So I always think with that in my mindset. So when I'm talking to my team, make it clear, open communication, these are the priorities. Okay, if in order to do that, then okay, this one will have to come as a lower priority. So having those communication skills and being able to encourage that open dialogue. Yep.
So you kind of mean like knowing how to be assertive a little bit, or being assertive in like a very professional, friendly way.
Yeah. But being more like meeting your team member midway.
Yeah, so compromising and, you know.
Something's got to drop if you want something else to be picked
Absolutely,
up, right?
yeah.
There's only so much an individual can pick up.
And not just saying yes to everything either, right?
No, of course not. And, you know, I'd like that as a two-way dialogue, right? So if it's unrealistic what is being asked of you, let's have that conversation.
Yes,
right?
don't hide from it and then later bring it up when there's problems. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's all communication skills, right?
Yeah, and then I don't know if you said top 3, but then the third one, otherwise, you know, we could be here all day coming out with skills.
I think there's top 3, yeah.
So I think the third one is adaptability. Yeah.
Yeah.
So by that, I mean, we all work in environments that are constantly changing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's change all the time, right? There's all sorts that goes on. And you have to be able to adapt with that changing landscape. Yeah. Be flexible, be open, help lead your team in times of uncertainty. Yeah. If every time a change is announced by the organization and you start panicking and like, oh, what's going to happen? It's not going to show a good side,
absolutely
right?
Not,
it doesn't mean we always agree with the change,
no.
right? We don't always, but we have to be adaptable. We know the change is coming. It's outside of our control. Let's try to control what we can within our own realm. You know, how is it going to impact us? Have those conversations. But you have to be adaptable. If you're very rigid and your mindset is very fixed, you're not going to grow.
Yeah, I think Amazon have this leadership principle called like disagree and commit. It's almost like, you know, you may not agree with it may not be your idea.
No.
It may be someone else's idea. But you're going to commit to it.
Exactly.
Because the end of story.
Yeah. I mean, as harsh as it may sound, you know, we have to work through it, don't we? And everyone's going to be on their own change journey. So you, as a leader, have to meet them there.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, you know, what is the thing that's worrying you? What is the thing we can control?
Yes.
There's going to be a whole realm of, you know, you can draw it into circles. There's going to be a whole realm of stuff we can control. There's going to be a whole realm of stuff outside of that, right? So let's focus on what we can control. Yeah.
Yes,
and in a lot of time, you know, it's not always the case, I know, but in a lot of time, change can be positive as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And as a leader, you have to kind of understand there's both sides to it. You know, people are going to be maybe averse to it, but at the same time, it can open up doors. It can open up opportunities too, right?
Yeah. I mean, now, if you look at the landscape that's happening now with the AI wave, there's a lot of change that's happening now, right?
Exactly. And that's I think, key in terms of my point there on adaptability, right? We have to embrace it.
Yeah.
You know, the AI is not going to take over everything right now. There is a journey on that. And, you know, my organization is bringing us on that pathway as well right now.
Yeah.
But as a leader, you have to adapt to that. I think otherwise you will get left behind if you don't.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. You can't just bury your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. Right?
Exactly. And, you know, I wouldn't say QA is going anywhere. It's evolving and we have to embrace.
Yeah, let's use these tools while we can, right, to help.
It's just another tool in our repertoire.
Absolutely, yeah. Great. So just switching gears a little bit to talking about maybe challenges you faced in your career. Do you have any sort of like top challenges, obstacles that maybe like impacted you?
Try to answer that in several different ways. But one thing, I suppose, seeing as this is a sort of a transition from QA engineer to QA director. One of the things I think along the way, because the journey wasn't plain sailing, you know, everyone has, you know, curves in that path along the way. But one of the things I'd say is rejection.
Okay.
And dealing with it, right? So there was a time when I went for a role and it probably wasn't the right time for me. At the time, it did sting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a bit of a
moment.
A moment. I need to review, sort of reset. Is this right for me? Do I want to apply for another role like that?
Okay.
So, you know, it didn't work out for me at that particular time, but I was given feedback, which was really valuable. So if I didn't try it, I wouldn't have known, right? So it took me a bit of courage even to get to the point of trying, shall we say. So this was stepping into a QA manager role at the time. And I had a really good leader who talked me through, almost in a way, kind of leading to my second challenge, because you said challenges. Maybe I had what we call imposter syndrome.
Right.
So, my leader believed in me more, I think, before I believed in myself.
Wow.
So my leader talked me through, where do I see myself going again, further down the path? There is a QA manager position, you could be right for it. We sat there talking about the qualities that you would need for this particular role, this position, how my skill set matches. And, the more I kind of started hearing about it, the more I started warming up to it. But I still had that niggle in my head of the imposter syndrome, right? So I suppose there's two challenges here. One, the rejection and how dealing with it. The second one, imposter syndrome, because it still creeps up today. I'm not going to say it's not there, right? It is there. So it's learning to deal with that in a way that you have it. And that's fine, I think, to have a certain amount of it. But how do you not let it overrule and really debilitate your thinking and not be able to move forward from it?
Absolutely. Yeah, because I think we all have some imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
I think it's natural to say we do. Everyone does.
Yeah.
And so what tips have you sort of found maybe to help deal with imposter syndrome?
So I think the first thing is it's important to acknowledge it. As we just said, everyone has it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's it. You acknowledge it. And then secondly, I'm not saying it's there every day. And sometimes it could be when you're given something that is outside of the comfort zone.
Yeah.
Right? And if that's the case, I'd say the first thing is, if you can feel yourself getting into a little bit of I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with this, is firstly breathe.
Yeah.
Calm.
Some breath work.
Yeah. Yeah. Calm. Then break down the task. Yeah. So break it down into manageable chunks and then meticulously work through it. If there's areas of ambiguity, go back to whoever you needed to clarify them. I like to use my stakeholders around me as well. Whether that be my peers, whether that be my leaders, whomever it may be.
Yeah.
How do I go about tackling this? Or these are my thought processes. And I think above all, be kind to yourself. Yeah. And that's something I'm learning. I'm still on a journey there.
Yeah.
I'm not there. I'm not the finished article, but be kind to yourself, right? You were hired because there was a belief in you. You demonstrated you have the skill set to be able to do the role. You're not going to know everything. And I think that's important as well. Yeah. You don't know everything.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's another growth in my journey I've had to get comfortable with, right?
Right.
And I think someone actually said it to me today, that there's a misconception that leaders know everything.
Wow.
And it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
there
true.
Is. So you look to your leader and your leader should have the answer. And I think in the early days of being in my journey and in a QA manager role and maybe even in a test lead role, if I was asked something, not that I'd make it up, but I'd fumble and I'd think, I have to have the answer. And I'd kind of, it's expected on me. I've been put on the spot. I need to have an answer. I need to give you a response right now.
Yeah.
But again, I'm on a journey on this, but I don't have to know everything right there and then.
Yes.
And I'm more comfortable now in myself in saying, look, I think this is it, but I'm not sure. I'll go away. I'll find out. And I think that shows a sign of maturity, that I feel comfortable in my own skin to say, I don't know. I'm going to find out. I'm going to come back to you and then I'll follow up on it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I love what you said about I can get back to you. Just giving yourself that time is I'm not saying I don't know. I'm not saying I can't find out. I'm just saying I don't have the answer right now. And I think it's a good point, because I think sometimes we do go to leaders and we are expecting an answer there and then. And sometimes, I've been in meeting rooms where we all look at the leader, right? At the moment.
Oh, I've been in many of those sessions. And I think I have got comfortable more so in saying, I will come back to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you mentioned rejection. What did you learn from rejection?
So I think for myself personally, the first step was accepting that rejection, right? So, there you are, applying for a role and thinking I'm ready for it. And, clearly it wasn't the right time and you've been rejected. So first thing is going through a journey of accepting it. Once you've overcome that, for me, it was a case of, okay, I have a plan now. I know that that's the path I want to go on.
Right.
So how am I going to make that happen? So in my particular scenario, my case, it was getting the feedback to understand why I was not ready yet, right? Once I've got that feedback, incorporating that into my goals,
I
right?
see.
Because I've got a journey now, I've got a plan, I want to get into that next step, right? How do I make it happen? So incorporating that into my path then and working on those goals within the current role, looking for those opportunities, right? So I always say to others who talk to me about leadership and how they can, if they're maybe saying the early part of their career, that's something I want to strive towards. Some people want to go down the technical pathway, some people want to go down the leadership pathway. And I always say, obviously, based on my own rejection and how it came about for me, start leading from where you are. Yeah.
Right.
So before you have the title.
Wow.
And that's words I had to eat myself. So I got rejected and okay, I want this.
Yeah.
I know I want it even more now than I
Wow.
think I wanted it before. How can I make it happen? Right? Look for those opportunities. Expose yourself outside of your team. Yeah. And this is where, again, a good leader can come in.
Yeah.
Right. So my leader at the time worked with me on where those opportunities were, right? Where I can excel. Yeah. So this opportunity's come. I think you'd be perfect for this. Do you want to go for it? Okay. It's a project that maybe I haven't worked on. I'm going to put myself out there, right? It's something a little bit different. So it wasn't easy. Coming back to the question and your point about rejection, rejection never is. It has negative connotations, but you have to use it as a learning opportunity, which I did in my case. Now was not the right time for me. Something will come along. And it did.
Brilliant.
Right? It did. I mean, my path went into a little bit of a segue before I stepped into QA manager role. I did a brief stint as a program test manager role, and that brought about lots of learning opportunity as well.
Yeah.
So had I maybe gone straight into the QA manager role, I wouldn't have had the short stint as a program test manager, which brought many challenges, which then I could bring back into when I then was later successful down the line in being a QA manager.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So really, rejection is an opportunity for feedback.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just thinking about feedback, rejection, we get rejection when we apply to a job maybe, or, you try to do some internal transfer or something that gets rejected. But what are other opportunities of getting feedback? I see generally in tech, I don't think we're good at getting feedback on our work. I think code is quite easy. You can get a code review on someone's work. Yeah. But in general, no one really asks, in my opinion, I don't think we ask for feedback enough.
Right, yeah.
Some organizations, you have appraisals, some don't have appraisals. So I don't know.
Yeah, so I think the organization you work for should definitely impact that, right? That doesn't mean that's where the buck has to stop. But
no.
Within my organization, there are many tools in order for this, right? There's 360 reviews, there's Workday where you can ask for a peer review. We have regular one-to-ones, we have quarterly connects, we have mid-year reviews, we have end-of-year reviews.
Right.
So there's plenty of opportunity where you can ask for feedback, yeah? And, I've got a number of directs now. So, I'm not... Obviously, I know what they're all working on, but I'm not there in the day-to-day. So I will go to maybe other stakeholders that they work in to get feedback for them. But I think this is a two-way loop, shall we say. So it's fine for me as the line manager to go and request for that feedback for the individual. But I think it's as an individual for you to drive your own path and your own journey. I'm a very, very big believer of that, right?
Yeah,
you've got to know where you want to be headed. And sometimes you don't know, that's fine. But, you've got to, when you have set that out for yourself, you've got to own your own journey, your own path, right? So you as the individual should be going out to your stakeholders to request that feedback. It doesn't matter if the organization doesn't have a tool to lend itself to you doing that. What's wrong in emailing somebody, pinging someone you work with? Hey, can you give me some feedback? Right, you've got AI there out there now. I'm not saying get AI to write the feedback for you, but you've got AI which can help you. How can I tackle this? My organization doesn't have a tool within itself. There's no process around this, right? So quite simply, you can just go email a stakeholder, email someone that you've worked closely with. Hey, can you give me some feedback on this? They might have given it to you verbally already. You can then obviously share that with your line manager. I've worked on XYZ. This was the output of that. Or you can just use it yourself as a learning opportunity. Okay, I didn't think of things like that. You're giving me this feedback. So we should always be striving to get that feedback in whatever form it is in.
I just wonder now, you've given me a thought. Do we need this AI agent that just collects data from...
See where you're going.
And then you could, it could ping you each day.
Yeah.
It could ask everyone and then it could like collect that information and give you a summary of this week.
Yeah. These are all the great things you did on. These are the areas of improvement that you need to focus on. Yeah.
You spend 1 hour extra on that Jira ticket or whatever.
Yeah. So I think it's important. It's important in any role, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't really matter what level you're at and whichever organization you're working for and whichever industry. I think it's really important because if you're not getting feedback, you don't know the areas you need to work on and you won't know how you're going to get into that next
where the
path.
weaknesses,
or that next path on your journey, right?
But this comes back into what you said earlier about being vulnerable, right, and bringing yourself to work. Because if you're vulnerable, you're happy to expose where you're vulnerable, and you're happy to get that feedback.
Yeah,
so it all kind of clicks in.
It does.
So, just moving on a bit, what advice would you give to someone entering or wanting to pursue leadership? And that could be QA leadership or leadership in development teams. What sort of advice would you give?
Yeah, so I think I might have mentioned it earlier already, but I think something that's really important is start leading from where you are today. So before you have the title, right? So you might say, well, how do I do that, right? How do I go about that? So I'd say build relationships across the business. So that means wider than in your team. You want to expose yourself outside, right? And I know sometimes you might say those opportunities come few and far between, but talk to your leadership, talk to your line manager. This is my journey, my path. This is where I want to be headed. How can you give me opportunities that expose me outside, right?
Yeah.
Be solution focused and be aware of the business goals. Because if you come across that what the goals are of the business, you will maybe shine that little bit more, yeah? And then And sorry, alongside that one as well. So thinking strategically, connecting your work to the company goals, and the value that you would bring. And then help others shine as well.
Wow.
I think that's important, right? So lift as you climb. Yeah, because it's nice on the way up, but on the way down, you'd want other people to be kind to you.
Yeah.
You don't know what way things can go.
Yeah.
So it's not just the what, it's the how.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. So the behavior traits as well that you want to think about.
For me, I think of that as like karma.
Yeah.
It's kind of, if you keep everyone happy, then, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah. You don't want to be ruthless on your way up.
No.
You want to build relationships.
Absolutely.
And have those behavioral traits and demonstrate them to others. I've got those behavioral traits that are going to make a good leader.
Yeah. Be a role model almost, right?
Yeah.
For other people to aspire to.
Yeah.
So, that's advice for other people, I guess. But what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, that's a good one. So I know we've touched on my journey and my transition and my pathway from QA engineer to director. I'm not saying when I started out that was the
North Star.
That's the word. That wasn't the North Star. That's happened organically and transition from one role to the other. And, when you look back, when I look back at things and, 5 years ago, I was probably not struggling, but I was thinking in the role, I can't, how am I going to go about this? How am I going to do it? Now, 5 years on looking, I'm thinking I have different challenges now. So how I've grown and matured in myself. But if I was to go really back to, when I started at the onset of my journey and my career, my pathway, the advice I would give to myself, my younger self, is trust your instincts. Yeah. You don't have to be ready to try. Yeah. So that a little bit, that imposter syndrome comes in again, right? Because there's so many times where I've probably passed opportunities.
I see.
I mean, and things I've worked out and transitioned in a way that they were meant to, but I've probably passed opportunities because I keep on telling myself in my head, I'm not ready for this, right?
Wow.
It's not the right time for me. Another one I'd probably say is your voice matters. Yeah. Speak up sooner. Again, the number of opportunities I've wasted there. So by that, I mean, being in a room where I'm thinking, I know that, I have that idea, I could speak up, and then kicking myself when someone else has said the same thing that I was going to say, but I was too afraid to speak up.
I see.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And partly that might be I don't know, maybe that might be, I've always been in an environment that, and I think still is somewhat, that's quite male dominated. Technology, engineering, leadership generally is. It's getting better. You know, if I look around in my peer group now, we're quite a mix of male and female. But, you know, all the way through my education, my course, I was one of the very few females. Being a QA engineer, there were more females, but then that step into the leadership, I feel less so. You know, there were rooms where I have been the only female in the room.
Wow.
And sometimes that can be intimidating, and maybe that was some of the reason where there's bigger personalities.
Yeah.
I feel a bit afraid to speak up. So again, going back, if I was to talk to my younger self, I would say, you know, you have a voice, make it be heard.
Use it.
Yeah. And the last one, don't water yourself down to fit in, which kind of goes part and parcel with that, the point before as well. Yeah. You're unique. You bring something to the table. You know, don't feel to fit in that you should be a mold in a certain way. So,
nice. Very nice.
I think it's easy to say with hindsight and having a career behind you, you know, these are things. But, you know, if I'd known them then, you know, I could have had a different pathway, but I can't complain. You know, I think things have worked out well. But
brilliant. Yeah. Thank you for sharing those. I think they're really good tips. Like, bring yourself to work, your full self. And I think that's really nice. Is there a final line you want to leave the Tech and Test audience?
Yeah, maybe we've touched on it a little bit a few times maybe in the podcast, but you don't have to wait to lead. Lead now, grow continuously, and above all, own your own journey.
Amen.
Thank you.
Raman, thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
Hello, it's Peter. Thank you for listening to this episode of Tech and Test. I personally appreciate it, and I hope you got something out of it too. If you're interested in subscribing, please do, because then you don't miss any episode I've created. And you can also visit techandtest.co.uk, which has all the episodes that I've created. And you can visit peterintest.com for my personal blog too. So I'll see you on the next episode.